very much for that too kind introduction. Doris's doctor is sort of reminding me of my grade 2 teacher who told my mother that I would never graduate from high school. So sometimes predictions are not the best. What I'm going to do in the next 30 minutes is to talk to you initially about my take on the issue of complexity, and then I'm going to apply it to a problem. And that problem is, how do we solve the problems in the world? So it's a modest little topic, but I thought we might as well go big or go home, right from square one. So there's a big change in the thinking in the world, and complexity is at the heart of it. Let me just give you the old paradigm and the new paradigm. So in the old one, we understand that the world is an ordered place, and that ordered systems can constrain agents, and that the world can be understood on the basis of the past. That's why everyone talks about best practices as being a way of being successful. Secondly, there are a finite number of elements that are interacting, and they interact literally, or often in a batch way. You think about the vernacular of business that uses terms like supply chain. Thirdly, based on experience, conditions and events are predictable. Fourth, solutions can come from the top, and they can be imposed or sold down. Five, traditional institutions have worked in the past. Our old models of corporations, of government, democracy, science, the media, schools, the universities, the city, and so on. Therefore, they can work in the future. And the job of leaders is to lead. It's to learn for their organization as a whole, create a vision, sell it down, simplify the complex, and make decisions for the enterprise. And that's how things happen when great leaders act. The new paradigm that centers around complexity is quite different. First of all, this view holds that the world is complex and it's unordered, and many contexts are complex, and the relationship between cause and effect is not clear. And there's an interplay between systems and agents. Secondly, there are very large, sometimes infinite, number of elements that interact, and they interact in a non-linear or parallel or a networked fashion. And the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. So just a little example would be, in the past, a lecturer stood in front of an audience and they listened carefully and took notes. In the new environment, the audience may be tweeting. And that may, in fact, contribute to their learning and to the conversation and discussion that's going on. And as part of this, minor changes can create large impacts. So rather than supply chains, we might have supply networks. In complex contexts, there's a high degree of unpredictability because conditions are constantly changing. And fourth, solutions emerge through self-organization. You hear the term emergence, as opposed to solutions being imposed from the top. And fifth, most institutions are suited to an ordered environment, but in the future, going forward, we need networked institutions that are critical for environments that are unordered and complex. And leaders, rather than leading in a traditional sense, often create the conditions for emergence, for solutions to come forward through organizational learning, allowing patterns to emerge, and so on. So that's a big change in the way that we think not just about business and management, but in how we think about the world. Now, I'm not a complexity expert, but in my sort of lay study of the topic, I think that Dave Snowden's Kinvin, as it's pronounced, model is a good one. And we've got ordered and unordered contexts. And increasingly, as the world becomes more connected, more complex, we find ourselves in the upper sort of left part of the framework more and more. And we're trying to often make decisions and take actions in complex contexts where the relationship between cause and effect is not as clear as in ordered contexts. And the problem today for many organizations with an ordered view of the world is they're trying to transfer what works in an ordered environment into an unordered environment, and often the results are not what we hope they would be. So to solve global problems, we need what Snowden calls a safe fail versus a fail-safe model of experimentation, fluid networks, and very high levels of collaboration. So let's take that kind of thinking and apply it to a relatively straightforward thing. How do we solve the world's problems? There are many problems in the world. And if you look at them, many of them are not, some of them are getting better, like poverty. Many are stalled, and some are getting worse. Some that threaten the planet as a whole, climate change being a good example. So, are these problems just too hard to solve, or is our model wrong? And have we been approaching them in a wrong way? Well, what is our model for solving global problems? It came out of 1944 in a big meeting that took place in Bretton Woods with 44 countries. And at Bretton Woods, we created the IMF and the World Bank. And then we created the UN, UNESCO, and the GATT, and the ISO, and eventually the G20 and the G8, global institutions based on nation states. And we assumed a whole number of elements that had to do with the way the world operated. The nation state is the dominant unit of organizing politically. Nation states need to find new ways to cooperate. Well, if you look around the world, we're really stalled. And there's open discussion at the highest levels of institutions like the UN and the World Bank. Are they fit for function anymore? Increasingly, we have a burning platform for change. You know the idea that you're somewhere where the cost of staying where you are become much greater than the cost of moving to something new. You're on an oil rig, it's on fire, you have to get off. Now, nation states are not going to go away, not in my lifetime. And they do have certain little powers, like a monopoly over military force and the right to tax and to coerce citizens and so on. But increasingly, nation states, while necessary, are insufficient. Enter a whole bunch of very profound changes in the world. One is the internet and the new social web, where we have 1 billion people that are now collaborating together in various ways. We also have a new generation, the first to come of age in the digital age, and these kids are different. My generation, the boomers, grew up watching television. This generation has grown up collaborating and interacting. And in a survey of 11,000 young people that I conducted in 10 countries around the world, we found that this is the first ever global generation. They view themselves as a generation. That never really happened before, and they can collaborate real time on a global basis. Self-organization is another powerful driver. People can self-organize to bring down tyrants in the Middle East, or to do any number of things, to create an encyclopedia or a new computer operating system. People can now participate, and the conditions for emergence are like we've never seen before. We've also got a change to the deep structure and architecture of every institution, where the world and our institutions are opening up and they're unbundling from being vertically integrated organizations into networks. Now, the person who's influenced me most on this passed away a month ago. His name was Ronald Coase, Nobel Prize-winning economist, who 70 years ago wrote a deceptively simple paper where he asked, why does the firm exist? And he said the answer is, and he won a Nobel Prize for saying it, transaction costs, the cost of search. This is 70 years ago. Finding all the right information and people and so on in an open market to do something is prohibited, so we bring that inside the boundaries of a corporation where we have things like filing cabinets and to find information and org charts to find people and so on. Well, the effect of the internet, to me, it's not a platform for hooking up online or creating a gardening community. It's not about websites, eyeballs, stickiness, clicks, page views, or any of that. It's a global computational platform that radically drops transaction and collaboration costs. And that's leading to a change in the architecture of every institution and how we orchestrate capability, not just in the private sector to innovate, to create goods and services, to engage with customers and so on. It's changing the way that we create public value. Governments are now releasing data and in doing so becoming a platform, and that enables private companies, civil society organizations, other government agencies, academics, individuals to self-organize to create what we used to call services or government. So this is a new division of labor in society at the local and national levels about how we create public value. Why wouldn't that also apply to the global level and to solving problems globally? So enter something new. Multi-stakeholder networks that self-organize. These things, I call them global solution networks, are today, right now, engaging tens of thousands of organizations and tens of millions of people on a daily basis. And they're becoming material in the world, and they're attacking every problem on the planet. So what is a global solution network? First of all, it has diverse stakeholders, the pillars of society: private sector, government, civil society, which includes NGOs, academics, foundations, and individuals. Individuals can now be pillars of society. So 2 youngsters during the Haitian earthquake can go onto the Ushahidi network and find a 7-year-old girl buried in the rubble under a shopping center. She's been there for 4 days, she's dying, she gets out a little message in Creole, they pick it up, they translate it into French, they triangulate her location, they advise the authorities, they save her life. 2 youngsters in Boston can be pillars of society addressing a global problem, because the Haitian earthquake was a global problem. So, multiple stakeholders. Secondly, they're addressing a global problem. The network itself doesn't have to be global, but the problem does. Thirdly, they exploit the digital revolution as key to their modus operandi. The internet, because it drops transaction and collaboration costs, enables them to operate. And fourth, they're not controlled by states or by state-based institutions. As with complexity theory, they emerge and they have new models of leadership and of organization and decision-making. So those 4 criteria get you on this chart. Now the UN is not on this chart because it doesn't meet those criteria. One of them, for example, is it's controlled by states. The UN is all about the member states, and if you go to an important meeting, you need to be a country to vote. So it turns out that this is like the blindfolded person and the elephant. There are not one type of these networks, there are 10 different types. And this has happened to me maybe 3 times in my life where I came across something and I thought, oh my goodness, this is huge, and nobody really knows anything about it. So the first thing to do in a situation like that is to try and develop a language and a taxonomy to talk about it. Prior to the internet, we had no language. We didn't know about disintermediation and reintermediation and B2B and B2C and business webs and the digital divide and the net generation and all the terms that are part of our vernacular today. So let me race through these and just tell you how they're different. Knowledge networks. Now these have been around for a long time. Scientific consortia have existed in the world, but because the internet, they can scale astronomically. So the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute that's working on peace from countries all around the world. These are networks that are in the business of creating knowledge. Wikipedia, 2 million people creating an encyclopedia 20 times bigger than Britannica, and according to the big study that's been done, the quality's roughly the same. TED, it's extraordinary, engaging millions and millions of people on a daily basis, and it's in the business of creating and the dissemination of knowledge. We never had something like Galaxy Zoo. These are 275,000 amateur astronomers who are mapping the galaxies. And in 2 years, they're doing what a leading astrophysicist said it would take all astronomers in the world 130 years to do. Because it turns out an amateur can categorize a galaxy. Which way does it rotate? Is it elliptical? Is it going in or out, and so on, with roughly the same accuracy as a professional with 1 hour of training. Extraordinary networks. The Khan Academy, 300 million people creating and studying knowledge. Secondly, we have operation and delivery networks. They're not creating knowledge, they're actually solving problems directly in the world. So for some reason, the World Bank can't get a $70 pump to a farmer in sub-Saharan Africa. So Kiva goes out and through peer collaboration and emergence raises $400 million to solve this problem. Just another example of that would be a crisis commons, which right now is intervening in the situation in the Philippines and is having a huge impact. My daughter lives in the East Village in New York. And when Hurricane Sandy hit, you couldn't find the Red Cross, but you put out some tweets to Crisis Commons, and people showed up with sandbags. Not controlled by a state, self-organizing, multi-stakeholder, addressing a global problem, which in this case is extreme weather. So just let me make a point here about complexity. Any one network might do more than one thing on this chart, but it can be said, because this is a complex world, but it can be said to fall primarily into this category. Policy networks are extraordinary. They're creating government policy that gets adopted by government or global institutions, but they're not controlled by states. International competition policy now is being created largely by multi-stakeholder networks. We've always had advocacy for decades. People advocated for centuries to bring about change. But we never had something like a vase. Is anyone here on the vase mailing list? Like 18 million people every day are engaged in this thing. We never had something like Kony 2012 about the Ugandan warlord Joseph Kony. Who has seen that video? Hands, please. Okay, homework assignment, Kony 2012. I watched this video. Joseph Kony's a warlord. He's a bad guy. He's kidnapped 60,000 children. The girls are sex slaves. The boys are soldiers. If you misbehave, he'll cut off your face and make you kill your family. So this multi-stakeholder network called Invisible Children says, we're going to make him famous, introduce him to the world. I watched this video on a Monday night. 12,000 people had seen it on the first day. By Friday afternoon, 86 million people had seen this half-hour video, and the next week, the US Congress took action. Now, there are lots of problems with every one of these. They're inspired, but are they legitimate? Many tough issues, but we've never seen anything like this. Watchdog networks are different. They're in the transparency business. So Human Rights Watch would be a gold standard. They're in Syria right now trying to find out what's actually happening regarding chemical weapons. The Sunlight Foundation, you know the idea, that transparency is a powerful force and sunlight is the best disinfectant. Number 6 is platforms. They're not trying to solve the problem of cooking fires or climate change or sexual violence or conflict. They create a platform for others to do that. We've never had these before. So Ushahidi was created during the, right after the 2007 elections in Kenya, where there was terrible violence, and the media and the civil society wasn't strong enough to report on this. So Ushahidi was a platform whereby people could say, there's a terrible thing that's happening right on this corner right now. And eventually, the authorities and the global community became involved, and they were able to stop the violence. There are platforms now. You're a civil society organization or an individual or an NGO or you're a government or you're a foundation. You want to bring about change. You can go to a platform and all the resources are there, information's there that can enable you to scale that change very quickly. And now, of course, because of global solution networks, you have 10 different instruments. In the past, you'd think, I want to bring about a change. I guess I advocate or protest. Well, now there are 10 things that you could do. to help solve a global problem. Tim Berners-Lee talked me into this one. The ISO, right after Bretton Woods, was a state-based institution where countries voted. Now the ISO is a global solution network. Some cases, states are not even involved. You have something like the World Wide Web Consortium that develops standards for the internet. Countries don't even come to the meetings. So a standard around something critical like the internet, and countries don't control it. So we have the global standards networks. These things are popping up all over the place, and standards, of course, are key to society. Now we get really crazy. Governance networks govern something on the planet, but states don't control it. So ICANN is part of the ragtag ecosystem that governs the internet. Now, in the case of ICANN, countries can come to the meetings. In the case of the Internet Engineering Task Force, it's purely volunteers and you don't represent an organization. Any one of you can go to the next meeting of the IETF and say, I think the 5-level protocols for the internet are all wrong, and here's why. It's a pure meritocracy. If you convince them to change, the global internet changes because of you. We've never seen anything like this. What else could we govern on this planet? If we can govern the internet that way, maybe we could govern water or food. Network institutions do at least 4 of the things on this chart. The World Economic Forum, the Clinton Global Initiative, Business for Social Responsibility. They're becoming sort of like little United Nations. And finally, diasporas. Diasporas are people from a company that are distributed around the world, but they still identify with the homeland. My father-in-law was the president of the Clube Sporting do Portugal, the Portuguese soccer club in Canada, and they were part of the Portuguese diaspora. But they were a problem-solving network. They were addressing all kinds of social and economic issues having to do with the Portuguese community and others around the world. And these, of course, involve many, many millions of people. So, 10 different types of these networks. Very different than the old vertically integrated command and control states or state-based institutions, which many think have become sort of fossilized and represent the old view and are inappropriate for a complex, network, unordered, and self-organizing world. I'd just like to invite any of you who are interested in this topic to join with us at the Martin Prosperity Institute and the Rotman School at the University of Toronto, and we're conducting a multi-million-dollar research project to understand these networks. What makes them tick? How do they achieve legitimacy? How do they use technology? How do they make decisions? How do they address a whole set of problems? We have 44 different projects that are underway, and we're trying to bring together all of the world's leading thinkers who care about ensuring that this smaller world our kids inherit is a better one. So I invite you to join with us. Roger Martin is here as well as one of my colleagues at the Martin Prosperity Institute, and we're working hard to make some real breakthroughs on this. So, just a closing thought. This is a big historic change that's underway. You know, you think about 150 years ago, 200 years ago, most of us were farmers. And the world was pretty simple and ordered. And knowledge was tightly concentrated in tiny oligopolies of the church and the state. People didn't know about things. There was no concept of progress. You lived your life, you were born, you lived your life, and you died. Along comes Johannes Gutenberg with his great invention. And over time, different parts of the society acquired knowledge. And when they did, the institutions of feudal agrarian society began to appear to be inadequate. It didn't make sense for the church to be responsible for medicine when people had knowledge. Martin Luther called the printing press God's highest act of grace. We saw the creation of the nation state, of industrial capitalism. We saw the creation of a corporation, commercial relationships, the university, modern science, parliamentary democracy, and it was all good. But it came with a cost. And now, once again, the technology genie is out of the bottle, and this time it's very different. The internet, the printing press gave us access to the written word. The internet enables each of us to be a producer, a publisher. The printing press gave us access to recorded knowledge. The internet gives us access not to just to knowledge, but to the intelligence contained in the crania of other people on a global basis. Infinite complexity, network effects, powerful emergence, and self-organization as a truly revolutionary force. This is not an information age. It's an age of collaboration. It's an age of networking, of human intelligence. And to me, it's an age of vast promise and opportunity. You know, a lot of people say, we got another couple of decades of ugliness in the global economy. It's too late to fix the problem of climate change. There's a lot of doom in the world today. To me, people say, what's going to happen, Don? And to me, the future is not something to be predicted. The future is something to be achieved. And we can achieve a very different future in the world than the one that the pessimists outline. But if we do that, we need to think different. Let me close just with a little video, if I could, and make a couple of points. Can we turn the volume way down on that music, please? The volume down, please. Down, thank you. I've been studying nature, trying to understand this complex world. Fish come in schools, bees come in swarms. Starlings over the moors of England come in something called a murmuration. Volume down, please. The murmuration refers to the murmuring of the wings of the birds. And throughout the night, the starlings are out over a 20-mile radius doing their starling thing throughout the day. And at night they come together and they create one of the most spectacular things in nature. It has a function. It protects the birds from predators. In these pictures, you can see a predator. On the right there is a hawk, a fierce predator being chased away by the collective and emerging power of the birds. Scientists that have studied this say they've never seen an accident. There's leadership, but it's not the old model. There's no one leader. And when the moment is right, a spectacular thing happens. Now, is this some kind of fanciful analogy, or might it be pertinent to our topic today? Well, this murmuration functions according to a lot of the principles of complexity. It's a big collaboration. There's an openness. There's a sharing of all kinds of information, including food sources, danger, location, trajectory. There are rules that govern it, the main one being don't bump into anybody else. It has a great interdependence. Somehow the birds behave as if the interest of the individual bird is in the interests of the murmuration as a whole. And this thing, as Richard started off right at the beginning, it has a great kind of integrity in the sense that this gives the birds the courage to take on a fearsome predator. So imagine, if you would, if we could connect ourselves on this planet through some kind of vast network of glass and air. Could we go beyond just sharing information? Could we start to create some kind of intelligence that extends beyond an individual, beyond a team, a company, a community? Could we create some kind of collective consciousness that would help us address the demands of a complex world? If we could do that, we could do some extraordinary things. You know, the learning organization, learning is key to complexity. We'd never achieved that. Maybe organizations are like people. They can't learn unless they're conscious. I try and make my talks interesting because I find that people learn more when they're conscious. Maybe that's been the missing link in creating learning organizations. I look at the kids in the Arab Spring today that are trying to bring about change, and I see something like this. You know, during the Egyptian revolution, People said Mubarak is too strong. The kids are going to go home. They won't keep coming out. He's going to crush them eventually. And at the time I wrote, I don't think they will go home, because if they do, he will hunt them down and he will kill them individually. Just as if a murmuration breaks up, those predators can have their prey. So I look at this and, I don't know, I do get a lot of hope. And if we think differently and we become engaged globally by the tens of millions, then maybe this age of networked intelligence will be an age of promise fulfilled and peril unrequited. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. Thank you. Thank you very much, Don. This was fascinating. And as we said, we have a few minutes for comments, Q's and A's, and I'm sure there will be some coming up. It's always the challenge in the beginning to break the ice. So who is starting? There were many things, of course. Linda Gretton, please.
Don, you perhaps saw in the Financial Times yesterday that there's been a report on the coordination in the Philippines, which has shown that it was actually worse than it was for any previous disaster. And there were many, many people who were, trying to operate, but did so in an extremely uncoordinated way. And I just wondered how much you see these different agencies actually coordinating themselves.
Well, if our traditional model of addressing problems like a terrible cyclone in the Philippines worked, we'd have states, state-based institutions working together in a coordinated way to address the problem. And here are people without food and water for 4 days, and nothing's being done. I think, and we've got somebody, one of our Global Solution Network team is over there right now studying how these new models are self-organizing to address the vacuum that exists. But to me, it's a vacuum, and the responsibility still lies with our states to step up. Now, in many cases, they don't, and this is the burning platform on why we need these new models.
So now we said we are looking upwards as well. I told it to all the chairs. So who would like to come in with a question from our Generation Y representatives? You're challenged now. There's a micro, right? We have a micro upstairs. So, anybody?
Well, it was a simple little topic.
Yeah, here, yes. And please introduce yourself when you speak.
Hello. My name is Hugo. I'm from the UK, Nottingham Trent University. I submitted a video for the Drucker for the contest, and it was about collaborative consumption. And a lot of the ideas that you spoke about with the global networks and how people communicate, they're very similar to the ideas of the concept of collaborative consumption. I just wanted to know what your views on this movement was, if you know anything about it.
Well, I think the notion of collaborative consumption fits in well with the whole notion of complexity theory and what I was talking about. That in the past, we had the media of the industrial age and the retail model of the industrial age, where something in control pushed out standardized units to passive recipients who were isolated and who were largely inert. Mass media, mass production, mass marketing, companies sold things to individuals. Now people can collaborate together as part of markets, and that changes everything. They can do group purchasing. They can share knowledge about whether products are good or not, and which creates this huge, powerful force of transparency, where organizations and producers and retailers need, because they're becoming naked, need to get fit. You know, they need to be buff. True value comes to the fore. You say you have the best products or services, they better be, because people can find out, they can inform others, they can collaborate, they can inform or create even collective responses to that. People can now come together, it's called the sharing economy, and start to share excess capacity. For some, is Robin Chase here? No, that's, sorry, that's next week. I'm at an event where Robin Chase is, but she created Zipcar and now Buzzcar. Think about your car and how much of that you use per day. We have massive excess capacity. And then we have an opportunity to create virtual mass transit systems through combining autonomous vehicles and getting more people into vehicles. So you can have more vehicles on the road moving in a more rational way, in a safer manner, carrying more and more people without digging up the ground for huge subways or putting in all kinds of light rail and so on. So this whole issue has become so huge that The Economist had a cover story on it. I don't know if you'd seen that about 5 months ago on the sharing economy. And it had a picture of a house in suburbia, and it was pointing to all the things where there is excess capacity. Your car, a boat sitting on a trailer in the driveway. The driveway, how much of your driveway do you use? Your attic, your lawnmower. They were even pointing to your dog. Yeah, and you can now share a dog if you want to. So you think about something like vacation properties. Full disclosure, I'm in the board of a company called Demure, D-E-M-E-U-R-E, that's for people who own vacation properties but who love to travel. So you can have your cake and eat it too. In some countries, sharing of automobiles, in a couple of countries in Scandinavia, through things like, sharing of extra bedrooms and space in properties is becoming as big as the entire hotel industry. And in California, there are as many people moving around in technologies like Uber and Lyft, where there's car sharing, than there is in the entire taxi system. So this is a huge opportunity to build a world that's more sustainable, that's more rational. It's not just some trick of retailers to be able to sell more stuff to people. And it's a very important theme.
Thank you. So we have two more, and we take both at once, I think. So Ben and then Johan, right?
Thanks, Don. Great presentation. My name is Ben Ramalingam, and I specialize in international development issues and humanitarian issues. My question is really about the traditional hierarchies you talked about, who face, in this world that you depict, a form of irrelevance, I guess. And there's a question not dissimilar to one that the chairman of IBM posed. Can the elephant learn to dance? There are a lot of issues which will still need vertical delivery. There are some issues that will need markets. There are some issues that will need networks. Are you confident that these hierarchies can actually change? And is it through the bringing of new people, the Generation Y into the hierarchies? Can they actually change the hierarchies and transform them? And do you see any examples of that?
And Johan, do you have a micro? Micro here, please. It's coming from the other side. Here it is.
Johan Roos, Professor of Strategy and Dean of a Business School in Sweden. Great story. I'm just curious, as you do research on this as well, as all of us are here are prone to try to improve and help the world. There are a bunch of people out there prone to try to destroy it. Do you also look at, in a sense, the dark side of some of these global networks? None mentioned, but I think we all know what I'm talking about.
Okay. You know, the old media was controllable. It was one-to-many. It was one-size-fits-all. It carried the value of its owners or advertisers. The new media is the antithesis of that. It's not one-to-many, it's one-to-one, it's many-to-many. It's highly distributed, it's not controllable, and it has this awesome neutrality. And it will be what we want it to be. And if we want it to be a platform to map the heavens like Galaxy Zoo, or to intervene in a hurricane like Crisis Commons, it will be that. If we want it to be a platform to organize against public education, as some in the Tea Party would do, it will be that. If we want it to be a tool to commit unthinkable acts of evil, it will be that. So my only message there is that we need to get involved, and we need to bring our legitimate expectations and values to the table, and that we can shape this thing in the right direction. Now, this does raise a complexity for our program, though. Where's the gray area where something is no longer legitimately a global solution network, where a reasonable person would not say this is a global solution network? A reasonable person would not say Al-Qaeda is a global solution network. But there are gray areas, like how about Anonymous? Well, there are parts of Anonymous that are doing really great things. They're creating transparency in the world, they're exposing corruption and dictators and all kinds of bad things, and there are parts of Anonymous that are doing things that a reasonable person would not say are helping move the world forward. But I fully confess, this is a gray area, and there's no clear cutoff point to me, and it's one of the challenges we have with this program. Now I think there were 4 other questions there, and I'll try and answer them all at once. But they had to do with traditional institutions being able to change, and how do we find the leadership to bring that about? And this is the problem of paradigms. You know, when you get a new paradigm, these things cause dislocation, conflict, uncertainty. New paradigms are often received with coolness, or worse, mockery, hostility. See, Tim Brown from IDEO here runs around implementing new paradigms in companies all around the world. And I'm guessing a lot of IDEO employees know what it's like to be received with coolness. Vested interests fight against change, and leaders of old paradigms have great difficulty embracing the new. So you go to an institution like the UN, and this organization functions with processes from 1945. And it's become highly fossilized and highly bureaucratic. But there's an opportunity for the UN to change, but to me the focus is not to get rid of bureaucracy, because that's going to take decades and decades. The focus is for the UN to embrace a whole new paradigm of these new multi-stakeholder networks, for parts of the UN to start curating these initiatives and supporting them. And there's a big issue around Ban Ki-moon's legacy. What could it be? And there are some within the UN, and I'm one of them, that say maybe it could be that under his watch a whole new model was forged about how we cooperate in the world and how we solve global problems. The other thing is, I could go on and I won't, but you know, I think Peter Senge, over 20 years ago, had a lot to say about leadership. You know, and it ties in well with the complexity storyline, that the old model of the leader was Winston Churchill, Lee Iacocca, a great visionary, and sells a vision down. Now, occasionally you get a leader like that, Steve Jobs, A.G. Lafley, and so on, but these are also people who are extraordinary collaborators as well. And leadership can come from anywhere, especially because we have all these collaborative tools that call forth great leaders in extraordinary ways, and in ways that never happened before. So this is a very positive time in history where anyone can really be a leadership if they will it. You know, we documented a story of a secretary, a clerical secretary who was the key person in the transformation of a division of Citibank. And she had what it took to be a leader. She willed it. So it means for all of us in this room, leadership is our personal opportunity, if we will it.
Okay, thank you very much, Don, again. Thank you.